Okay, I thought it would be fun to do a bit of a Ritual Beast guide for the KC Cup. My previous experience in the KC Cup with Ritual Beasts is the KCGT, thanks Herbal, the KCGT first stage, which was essentially the RRQ. It was a KC Cup where the top 100 qualified. And I made my own version of Ritual Beast, Shadow Game Ritual Beast, and I came, I think, 59th. I wish it was 69th, but there we go. I came 59th global in that, and I basically only played Ritual Beasts. I played Cyber Dragon a bit at the very, very start, but apart from that, it was mostly Ritual Beasts. And I was as high as third global at one point. Day 2 was a bit harder, but yeah. So that was then, and since then, I believe there have been KC Cups since, I know that much. And I think Ritual Beast has also consistently got top 100. And outside of just KC Cups, I used Ritual Beast to go 6-0 in the top 100 to make the finals. And then I used Ritual Beast again as one of my free decks in the finals, where I came second to Zaid King. So big shout out to Zaid King. Congratulations again. But yeah, for that reason, I think I know a little bit about Ritual Beast. I'm sure there are probably still the odd one or two people out there that understand the deck more, but I understand it enough to make this video. And I think it's an interesting time because Ritual Beast hasn't seen as much success in tournaments recently. And people expected it to after the most recent nerfs. It didn't get that badly hit. But it's not really achieved into tournaments at what a tiered deck you'd expect from a tiered deck. So why do I think it's going to be good in this KC Cup, and why do I think you should be playing it in this KC Cup if you enjoy it? And also, just for those people in chat, I am going to listen to chat and I will take questions and stuff. I'm just going to try and fire through this a little bit, and then I'll take pauses where I look at chat. But as you can see in, I think it's the bottom left-hand corner, why play Ritual Beast this KC Cup? So there are 3 main reasons, and the first one is a favourable meta. So I've already highlighted this, but during the KC Cup, it's one of the few times where the Western meta, Europe, North America, tournament meta interacts with Japanese meta. And the meta is quite different, which shocked me at first, but if you ever look at Japanese tournaments, which are obviously played at hours that most European and American people can't play, if you ever look at their tournaments, the decks that they're playing are very different. And that's why KC Cup meta always feels slightly different to, I would say, a normal tournament meta. And for those of you that don't know, someone called King Halo, who I think won the first ever KC Cup, so proper old school Duel Links player, because the game's been around long enough that that's a thing now. He did a summary of the Japanese meta. He did like a 5,300 game sample, and for anyone that's really interested in that sort of thing and wants to get some strong data for the KC Cup, I'd recommend finding that. I think you can buy it for, it's probably just under $10. It would cost me £7, if anyone knows what that means currency wise. But he did a really advanced look at the meta, and the biggest deck that was played in this 5,300 game sample, and one of the most successful, was Cyber Dragon. Now, the best thing about Ritual Beast is that it eats Cyber Dragon for breakfast. And that is all thanks to this card right here, Winder. Cyber Dragon need ridiculous hands to OTK through just a single Winder set pass. And you can sit on Pelfin for ages, and yeah, it always pops up in the KC Cup as a big deck because it's a quick deck and it doesn't have loads and loads of terrible matchups, and yeah, it's sacky, so you don't need that much skill to play it and to do well with it. And it's the best deck according to Japanese meta. Do I agree with that? No, but this is what they are playing right now, and for that reason, when you expect to see a lot of Cyber Dragons, I'd say this is your best option. Interestingly, lots of people would argue that Crystron's is a better counter. Maybe for a good Crystron player, that's true. In the sample size, the most consistent counter for Cyber Dragon with a lot of games was Ritual Beast, and that's why Ritual Beast looked like a good deck, and that's what in the sample that they took from Japan, and that's when it got me thinking, this is a pretty strong deck, because you have to think of the other matchups that Ritual Beast has. And another one that is pretty good against is Control Shiranui. Now, that's not always true. How good this deck is against Control Shiranui mostly depends on the text that Control Shiranui are playing, because they have quite a lot of text bases. But Lancia's not really seeing that much play right now, which is one of their texts that just made it really hard. And they're not really using counter traps right now either. It's more floods and chains, and maybe even the odd Sphere Creeper cards that don't really bother Ritual Beast. The only one that I'd say that bothers Ritual Beast is a Ballista Squad before they get going. That can be annoying, but even then you can work around that. So that's another strong matchup. Now, there is the elephant in the room, and that is the Karakuri matchup. That's not ideal, but that brings me on to my second point, which is that Ritual Beast's core is pretty small. So, well, it's reasonable size, but you can tech cards to make the matchup against your bad matchups much better without it really hurting your good matchups, because your good matchups, you just rely on your core engine, which is the Winder and the Petal Fin. So let's pull this down to what I think is just the core of. So I don't think 3 CCs are core, but I think 2 CCs are probably core. Right, this is going to be a bit controversial. Rampengu is not core. Is it a good card? Should it be played? Yeah, probably. But is it core to the deck? Is it essential to the deck's functioning? Absolutely not. It brings out some nice plays. It might add consistency, but for now, it can be taken. So you're getting yourself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tech spaces. And then if you want to get rid of CCs, you can even put more tech spaces in. And that's quite a lot to play with when you're thinking about Karakuri. You can tech in certain cards, which I'll go through later, which are going to be good against the deck. And also, Karakuri can struggle to break through you when you've got good combos with Winder. Thank you for the follow. So, yeah. And your tech spaces can also be used for other matchups. So, if for example, you're scared of Dark Magician, then you can put that third CC in. You can put more returns or bonds in to have more play through their circle play. I'm trying to think about bad matchups. Lunar Knight's another bad matchup. You can play Herald. Herald you can also play against Invocation decks, but they're not that popular at the moment, especially in Japan. They're really low down in this sample size. And I know I keep talking about Japan, but it's really worth thinking about them in this situation, because they make up so much of the KC Cup. So you really have to consider what's going on over there, which is why I do recommend looking into that report. But if you don't want to do that, take it from me. They're playing lots of Cyber Dragon. This deck is very good against Cyber Dragon. Therefore, I think it will succeed, certainly for parts of the KC Cup. I'm not promising this is going to be the best deck for the entirety of the KC Cup, but I think it's a strong contender and definitely viable for top 100. And that brings me on to the third reason to play Ritual Beast this KC Cup. And this is day one early particularly, but it does ring true for the entire time. Everybody misplays against Ritual Beast, and I don't understand why. The deck has been out for over a year now, and it is. People joke all the time. I've already seen the joke in the trap, in the trap chat, quite a few times, and it's just basically no one reads cards, and that is more true for Ritual Beast than it is for most decks, because people just don't seem to know what's happening to them, and then they're like, oh, why did my Sphere Creeper not work against a card that is unaffected when it attacks? Altia Pelio. And they don't understand that banishes are happening. They don't understand that I'm going to be able to consistently bounce with tag out and go into Winders and stall out. Anyway, yeah, people are terrible at this game, and Ritual Beast really brings it out of them. Obviously, the very top players, when you get into the top at day 2 and 3, aren't going to be making the same mistakes. If you play Ritual Beasts and you're in top, I don't know, 40, 50, and then it's getting a bit harder, please just swap decks, because when people understand how they're playing against this deck, it does get a bit harder, but misplays really do boost this deck's performance. So that is what I'm going to say on that. So to conclude, favourable meta, lots of favourable matchups in the meta, very few unfavourable matchups in the meta, and the most unfavourable matchup, which is probably Karakuri, you can tech for with your space. And then everyone's going to misplay against you the first day as well, so it's quick, easy points. Those are my highlight reasons for playing Ritual Beast, and those are the reasons I imagine it did well in the meta report from Japan, and I think that other people seem to be catching on in this side of the meta too, this side of the world, because I believe Sokram, who's a great Ritual Beast player, also won a point room with it, so yeah, there's pretty good evidence that this is going to be one of the decks this tournament. So I'd recommend, if you've played it before and you're good at it, brush it off, consider it as an option. If you don't, please read the cards before you start playing them, because you will lose to misplay sounds. And then I'm going to move on to the next part, which are skill options. So unfortunately, because someone did well with Ritual Beast, I don't know who, no, it probably wasn't just that, but they nerfed Shadow Game anyway. Shadow Game was by far the best skill with this deck, because it can be very defensive and just stall your opponent out, and it would win so many matchups. Haven't got Shadow Game anymore. Also don't have Restart, because the way they've nerfed the skill, you have to play 7 spells and 7 traps. Ritual Beast isn't doing that. The monster engine is too big. So yeah, those skills are out of the question. So I would say, in terms of your skill options for this deck, it's a two-way shootout, and it's between See You Later and Sealed Tombs. So I have typically in this format played See You Later, and I would say the main reasons for that are mostly down to this guy, Spiritual Beast, Petalfin. Now Petalfin's pretty good. Getting his effect off 3 times in one turn is really quite nice. I have to say, it does come up more than you'd think. You obviously have to do reasonable setup, because you're discarding 3 cards to do that, but it just gives you a big out to your opponent's board. It's also, See You Later has other little bits that are helpful as well. So you can get free banishes with Apelio, which can make him go above 3,000, and this deck doesn't have a way to go above 3,000 attack really, so it's really nice that you can do that as a little option. There's also some neat plays with Lara and summoning something, and then when it's stuck next turn you can bounce it back up and then summon it again. It's a bit like in Hearthstone when you get Battle Cries, it's like using her summoning effect twice. It's really neat. So yeah, there are little bits that See You Later can do which make it a very viable skill, and anyone that's running it successfully, I don't blame you. I think that it's a good skill. Sealed Tombs is the other one, and Sealed Tombs is a bit more of a generic skill, and it's also more of a counter skill than something that enhances the deck. It's shutting down the graveyard when, as I've already pointed out, Shiranui is going to be a fair size of the meta. That's both control Shiranui and counter Shiranui. So I think combo Shiranui, sorry. Combo Shiranui was the second most played deck in Japan, and combo Shiranui is a deck that's getting huge play in tournaments and everything as well. Combo Shiranui won the last KC Cup. It's going to be big, and having a skill that just shuts them down for one turn, it's going to be quite huge, especially when you're shutting down on your turn, so you can stop them using Catan to kill your board, just stop their disruption, and in their turn then they're not going to be able to do their plays. So Sealed Tombs is going to be huge against Shiranui, and that is alone, I think, a reason enough to play it, because while See You Later gives you some benefits, they're not as big as that, anywhere near as big as that. And then you've also got to consider that Sealed Tombs is good in other matchups as well. Maybe not so much Cyber Dragon, but like I said, you're already winning that pretty comfortably. It's really good against Crystron, you're closing them down for a turn. Just anything that's relying on the graveyard. In Invoke decks like Magician Girls, Roids, you're closing them down for the turn. It's really nice. Again, doesn't do much against Karakuri. That would be my one criticism. It does small things. They can't use their equip spell to bring stuff back from the graveyard, and they can't use their trap to change position, but it's not doing a huge amount. Sealed Tombs, in conclusion, is probably the best skill for this event, I would say. just because of Shiranui alone, but then it's got other smite benefits too. So that would be my advice on skills. I would say go with Sealed Tombs. I've been playing it. I've enjoyed it. Didn't use it as much as I should have, I would say, in those games, just because you have to remember to use it actively sometimes when you've not been playing it for a while. But I do think that, you know, if you just use your brain a little bit, it's by far the best skill of the two. Unless you literally start seeing no graveyard decks and then go back to See You Later, because that actively benefits the deck somehow. But you're going to be seeing graveyard decks, so you're going to have to counter. So, yeah, and then we move on to tech choices, which was going to be the bulk of this, but I've already talked for far too long. I waffle on a little bit, as you can probably tell at this point. So we're going to go on some of the main tech choices that are seeing play right now and benefits and what decks they're good against. One that I think is interesting, Sokram used this in his build, and that is Sphere Karibo. Obviously, you know what it does. You saw someone misplay using it against me. It can't be CC'd is one benefit to it. So it's like hand traps are always good for that. It can be Divine Raft, which is annoying, but that very rarely comes up. I think Sphere Karibo has good metas and bad metas. I personally am not a fan of it right now. Here's the reason. You use it against Karakuri to protect them killing you that turn. They don't have lethal. They still have a full board with free back row, because that's how Karakuri plays right now. They go first and draw their entire deck. It feels like when you're playing against them. And I don't see how Sphere Karibo is really helping you there. It's just preventing lethal. Now, Sphere Karibo does have matchups where it does shine. Cyber Dragon is definitely one. It's if you are unlucky enough to brick against Cyber Dragon, Sphere Karibo still often saves you long enough until you can unbrick. And by bricking against Cyber Dragon, I mean you don't have a way to get Winder easily, or Petalfin. There's also other matchups that it's drawn against. Shiranui, it can sometimes keep you alive when you're in. But I think that those are matchups that the deck is already okay in generally. And this might increase your win rate in those matchups by another few %. But you're already doing those matchups. You're already doing well enough in those matchups, I would say. You want your techs to help in your bad matchups to level out the deck here. Is my opinion, unless you're just overwhelmingly seeing your good matchups. But I don't think that's going to be the case, because the meta is going to shift consistently. So I wouldn't play Sphere Karibo. People are playing Sphere Karibo. It's not a bad card. I just don't see how it's helping in your bad matchup, which is Karakuri, Lunar Lights, really. Sphere Karibo's not really saving you. You're still going to have all the same problems. It's just your turn again, so you can just pass and then wait to die for one more turn. So then we move on to the cards that do help in your bad matchup, which is Karakuri. And those are Wall of Disruption and Needle Sealing. Now, Wall of Disruption is a card that's been around for ages, and it also fits into that category of cards that I said where people misplay a lot at the lower levels, and people misplay into Wall of Disruption all the time. They don't consider, oh, maybe that thing that's not serving any delays is of some relevance. Maybe you should consider that. They just swing, and you steal games because of this card. Not just against Karakuri, against lots of things. Now, generally, I would not recommend Wall of Disruption in formats or metas where Hatronade is seeing decent play, because there's just a way to get around it. But Hatronade isn't seeing that much play right now, because most of the decks have got Limit 2 cards already, so they can't fit Hatronade. Dragoonity is the one where that's not the case, but it's one matchup, you know? But if you don't like Wall of Disruption, and I think there are valid arguments for not liking Wall of Disruption, then I think another card that you can look at that's also ridiculously powerful against Karakuri is Needle. And this is another card that I would say people don't misplay against. So actually, I'll give you an example. I casted a game of Team Wars this weekend. I casted Claw Clan versus Death Row, and I would say Jack, a very good Japanese player, for reasons that I still can't quite understand, summoned a third monster so he could be hit with needle sealing using heroes. And people do plays like that. Even good players are making these sort of plays where they're actively playing into cards like needle sealing. And then you have Karakuri, which very actively plays into needle sealing. And you can easily keep one monster on the field with a window or something like that. If you activate needle sealing when Petal Fin's on the field, the Petal Fin's not even dying. So I think Ritual Beast is one of the decks that can play this, and it's going to win you matchups against Karakuri. It's going to win you matchups where your opponent misplays. It's going to win you matchups where your opponent's under sealed tombs, and all of a sudden it really hits them. For me, decks that I would want to be playing for this KC Cup are Wall of D or Needle Sealing. I would recommend a couple copies of one of them. So yeah, another one that's interesting if you're seeing a heavy back row meta is Forbidden Lance. Forbidden Lance is nice in a couple of weird situations as well. So it's nice against Blackwings because you can reduce the monsters to where they can search. It's nice against Cyber Dragon because if they try to activate their trap, you can make your monster immune, or you can stop their monster even being affected by it. And it's nice against Invoked because if you can activate this on an Alistair, then the fusion's not going through. Yeah, Wall of D, another great example is when someone misplayed against me in the KC GT. That's someone that top 16 players in the world and just walked straight into a Wall of D. But anyway, I would say that Lance is another interesting pick because it offers good utility in the helpful situations that I just mentioned, but also you can dodge back row, which is Ritual Beast can play through back row to an extent, but there are still annoying back row cards like Ballista Squad, which you're going to see some play, and Forbidden Lance is an option to get around them. So yeah, that is another tech card to consider. Another one is Herald of the Abyss. Now, this is one that I have a bit of a bugbear with, but I'm gonna walk you through it anyway, if I can spell. Herald of the Abyss. So yeah, the main reason people are playing these cards, this card, and cards like this, like Share the Pain, is because you have no out to Casitas in this deck. It just doesn't exist. Lots of you, like in your main engine, they play Casitas and you have to scoop if you don't play a card like this. And that is the reason for including Herald. And in formats where Elemental Sabers were big, where Alistair decks were big, I think that absolutely necessary. What I would say right now is Magician Girls is the biggest deck that's using a way that summons Casitas, and it's not that big a deck in the meta. And the question is, do you want to play a card which is very average against a lot of the meta just because of one bad matchup? And not only that, you have to hard draw this card to out the Casitas as well. So it's not even as simple as I play this so I have an easy answer to Casitas. It's a case of, okay, I play this, now he's gone to Casitas turn 1, now I've got 2 turns to draw, or I'm just going to die from whatever else, or 1 turn because he's playing Perk on me next turn. I can see why people play it, but personally I don't like cards like this that are that situational. I didn't use Herald when Elemental Sabers were much more popular. I just used traps instead to try and get around it. But yeah, I don't really recommend this card, but for those of you that hate just losing to one card, then by all means play it. Play Share the Pain, play Lava Golem, play general cards that out Casitas or Lunar Lights. Triple Boost does out Casitas, that's a point, but if they've got an Alistair in hand, then it doesn't. So I think you have to accept that every deck has its weakness, and one of this deck's biggest weaknesses is just that it's not going to be able to out Casitas no matter what you do. And I think changing your build for a less consistent card to, interact with that is not worth it. I would much rather be playing other cards. So the final the final spots are for, or can be for, generic back row. This deck can fit a couple of cards like Floodgate, which can situationally out-Casitas anyway. This deck can play Chains. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it at the moment. I'm not sure it's the meta for it. This deck can play Chain Disappearance, which is let's have a quick look into this as an example of back row that is playable right now. There we are, Chain Disappearance. This hits so much of the meta right now. This is a real, for most decks that are playing back row right now, Chain Disappearance is good. I know there are people that are like, this is in itself quite a situational card, but it hits so many different decks. Magician Girls don't like this. It even hits Cyber Dragons. It really hurts Shiranui, which is going to be, as we've said, a big part of the meta. It really hurts Karakuri. You sort of win the game if you can resolve this early against Karakuri. So it's definitely one to consider. Now, personally, my advice on techs would be Chain Disappearance is good, but Wall of D and Needle Sealing, two copies between them, I think is pretty important, just because you need inherent outs to Karakuri in your deck, because you're going to be seeing quite a lot of them. Everything else is up to you. I've just run through some of the biggest options, but I like some of the techs that I don't like, other players are doing well with, so I don't want to necessarily really promote one hard and not promote one. But I would say that it's probably good to have a third CC in your deck, because it makes Sealed Tombs live more often. So that's one that I like in my build, because I hate losing to a back row that I couldn't do much about. But you have definitely, like I said, I would call this the course. You've got 5 cards to play around, and you can play around with that. You don't have to stick with one deck list for the whole event. I definitely wouldn't. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. But you just have to think, what are the best techs for the meta at present? And if you can work that out, and you get a little bit of luck, and you're not a bad player with Ritual Beast, then I promise you it's possible to top 100